Morning again. Welcome to the first panel of the day that I'm going to be hosting for you. My name is Joe Russell. I am CRO and Insight Lead at GH. What that means is that every day I help our clients understand and optimize their site performance through things like research, experiments, and reflection. And what I want to do in this panel over the next 30 minutes is make an argument for a different approach to site optimization. You see, from my experience, a lot of organizations have got backlogs, roadmaps filled with really big builds, redesigns, replatforms, new integrations, endless lists of features. And some of that's necessary, but often it can be slow to get live. It's expensive to build, carries a lot of risk. And when you don't find out whether that's worth doing for months, after making a commitment, that's a big bet to make. And conversely, a test and learn approach can be quicker, cheaper, and safer. And most of all, it has a compounding effect that those one-shot projects can't achieve. And that compounding effect is what we call the CRO Flywheel. Now, I'm going to invite some guys onto stage in a minute, and they're going to help me explore this topic in a little bit more detail. First of all, I've got Paul Ryazanov, who's CEO of MageCloud, a platform that helps Magento and Adobe Commerce merchants scale their digital operations. Now, Paul's got deep expertise across CRO, SEO, marketing. He's worked with a wide range of merchants on conversion performance. So please welcome Paul. Thank you, Paul. Yeah. Next up, we've got Skujins. He's head of digital commerce strategy at Scandiweb, one of the world's leading Magento agencies. Now, Maris works at the intersection of architecture, strategy, and delivery, and has particular depth of experience doing optimization for B2B clients. Please give a warm welcome to Maris. And finally, I've got Hugo Wilson, who's senior experimentation consultant at Conversion. He spent a decade in data-driven marketing and the last 4 years focused on maturing experimentation programs for the likes of Nike, Foot Locker, Motorway, and The Times. He's hands-on, he's running those tests, he's putting real revenue on the board every day. Another round of applause, please, for Hugo. There we go. As if by magic. So, guys, let's start with the problem. I've described the pattern, up there, those big bet roadmaps. I'm sure a lot of people in the room have seen it. The backlog's full. The next release is going to fix everything, except maybe it doesn't. And then the next thing, and then the next thing. Meanwhile, conversion hasn't moved. Everybody's looking at the dashboard. They're going, I'm not getting the results I want here. And that's really what we're going to challenge today. Maris, I mentioned, you come from this world of large-scale projects, particularly for B2B. When you're in that early conversation with clients, what are the signs that a team is stuck in that big build thinking?
That's a great question, and especially when we're talking about big projects. Because, big projects, small projects, they're all projects, and they all need to be developed, and they have a goal to be reached. So, in essence, you can think in a similar manner. However, when you have a small project or a smaller problem, it is easier to solve simply because there's less man hours needed to get there. I really love the way someone put it to me recently, how to look at reaching the goals. And the best way to look at reaching a goal is a little bit of thinking in terms of the Google Maps. No matter where on earth you put a point, there's always a way, but there's never, or nearly never, only one way to do it. Second to that point can be very close or it can be very far away. So that's the difference between the small project and a large project. The smaller the project, the less ways to get there and the easier it is to get it. So some of the flags that we see of people thinking in a big build project is usually that either you're trying to solve for everything at the same time, that I see as a big flag. Of course we need to understand the goal and where we need to get, but we don't always, sometimes we do, but we don't always need to understand every single detail of the route and every twist and turn on how to get there. It's fine to live with the unknown, within the reasons, of course. There are some exclusive cases. Very recently, we had a B2B case here in the UK for a B2B retailer who had to get off a legacy custom platform at a certain time. Big business, complicated processes. Obviously, we had to figure out how to solve all of that more or less at the same time. But if time allows, or kind of if finances disallow, frequently there are ways how you can iterate the process. So you can kind of think of it as rip out a process of the machine and then replace it bit by bit.
Yeah.
So it gives you the iterations, experimentation, and validation before you spend the top dollar.
Yeah, fantastic. Paul, let me come to you next. You know, as I mentioned, you've got that view across a lot of different merchants there. You know, from your experience, what do you think separates the ones who consistently improve from the ones who are stuck in this kind of doing a lot of activity and not getting anywhere?
My short answer will be mindset.
Yeah.
So in my agency, we have two types of clients. One who come very fast, we want to do CRO, let's go. And it turns out they don't have a budget. So they're trying to basically force to go for the CRO because they dream about putting £1 and taking £2 back, which is unfortunately not possible. It does not work like that in the business. And there are second types of clients. They already have a profitable money-making machine, enough revenue, enough traffic, and they see conversion rate optimization service as an extra expense. It's hard to convince them. So the way, if there's a bunch of the agencies here, the way how I do it, I'm basically asking a simple question, like how much you spend now with Google Ads? Back in 2014 in conversion conference in Las Vegas, we come to conclusion that 10% of Google Ads budget needs to be spent with conversion rate optimization. So they ask, okay, 30, 40 grand. You basically then say, okay, what's the conversion rate? 3%. It's the data. And then you say, is it correct that 97% of traffic that you send and you spend your money on are not converting? And they say, yeah. And that's the easy way. You just basically don't tell them that it's an extra expense. You tell them, guys, grab this 3 grand or whenever budget, 10%, invest it with my agency, so we do conversion rate optimization. And they already see it not as an expense, they see it as an investment in the business. And then, if you're obviously doing a good job, it will help. But sometimes you have to prove it by telling them about, you know, like for example, in our agency, we don't charge anything up front. We do the work, and then we carry on the invoice after it's done. Plus, I don't know, like we use convert.com as a platform, very expensive. So I'm telling my clients, I'm so confident that we can deliver results that I'm going to pay for the usage of the convert.com from my end. So I think the mindset, but also your own position, how you pitch that, makes a difference.
That's a great reframing there of the potential saving as much as the growth from there. Hugo, let me just ask you a question. You know, there about that other kind of mindset shift of what clicks in the mind when they see test and learn working. What does that moment look like with the kind of clients you've worked with?
Yeah, good question. I think most of the time, that moment that really clicks is when you get that first batch of tests back. And there's going to be some tests where the senior leadership team were really confident in, and there's going to be some where, to be honest, you had to fight to get over the line, and they didn't really want to run them. And the results never line up with their expectations, and that's why we experiment, right? But it's that moment where the one they really thought was going to win completely tanks their conversion rate. And then there's this realization that in the last 2 years, they've kind of confidently put things on their site without testing and never really monitored it. And then, they realize they have to kind of go back and start thinking in this more methodical experimentation mindset.
Yeah. And there's another great way of putting that kind of risk argument I was making before of kind of showing them, well, maybe you've already made the missteps already. Now, just moving on, like for me, like the flywheel has to start somewhere, and I feel like the foundation really is around data and insight. It's about being well informed in order to kind of shape a good roadmap, shape good experiments there. But often, I find brands don't really know what they're measuring, they haven't got good data, or they're not really understanding their customers and the real user needs. Things aren't getting validated, basically. Paul, from your standpoint, what are the kind of gaps that you normally see in a kind of Magento Adobe Commerce setup?
Let's start with the way how we measure everything, right? So we use GA4. My CRO guys have access to Magento admin panel, so they can see the numbers. We've got some other platforms, Clarity, heat mapping, nothing fancy. Everyone in the room can use it. The biggest gap is that the Google Analytics, if you compare data with Magento, it's probably about 20, I don't know, many clients, 26% difference between real transaction with what is in GA4. Obviously, there are some server-side tracking, Stape, Adding Well, Elevar, Adding Well, they have their own cookie plugin. So it can feed the data in GA4, which can help you with determining the data. But I think the biggest gap which Magento can improve it's a build standalone integration, direct integration. There are some extensions, obviously. And I think this month, sorry to say, but Shopify releasing now direct integration from Shopify into the GA4, making data accessible. And obviously reporting, that's another component that probably most of the merchants struggling with directly in Magento platform. Like all of my clients telling me, like that's why extensions such as Amnesty report and exist. Credits to Amnesty if they are in the room. So I think what might happen is if I would be on Adobe, I would probably try to find those solutions and implement as a base.
Yeah.
If I may add here,
Yeah,
just a small plot twist. I had a conversation with one of our Swedish clients last week at a workshop, and it is a client who has a retail chain in Sweden, and they are thinking of various ways to personalize, improve, and sort of, what to do with the website for it to become more converting and else. But in essence, the way we put it is that they are trying to find things in the dark or being blind. And of course, they're not bad things to look for, necessarily like personalization or increasing, kind of highlighting one thing or another. But the conclusion, because you just mentioned data here, and it's like one of the main conclusions that we came to is data is the key. If you need to invest early on, invest in collecting data. That's one thing that really can help you figure out and trigger optimization moving forward. But without the data, without that foundational layer, we're just guessing.
Yeah, 100%. And we don't get to go back and capture that data retrospectively. We've got to get that up front. So thanks for that, Maris. Hugo, I want to come to you on the other side of things, the more qualitative side of research and talking to users. That gets skipped a lot. But why do you find it so useful? And maybe give us an example of one of those times where it's really just created a light bulb moment.
Yeah, sure. First, I do love the data. The analytics, the GA4, the Adobe, all of the data is amazing, and I live in GA4. But having said that, it tells you what's happening on the site, which is fantastic. But that's also the limitation. It's only telling you what's actually happening, and it doesn't give you that why. It doesn't tell you why users are doing something. And that's where user research comes in. So usability testing, user research, in-depth qualitative analysis. So that really gives you the why that then can help you build your hypothesis for experiments. And to give you an example, I'll give you an interesting example, actually. So quite recently for a car rental company, we just added a really simple survey onto a site. And it just stated, ask the user, why are you looking to rent a car? So again, we're looking to get that qualitative data, understand user motivations.
But what was really interesting about that test is, or that survey, is that we ran it through an A/B testing platform because the site wanted to confirm that adding that question wasn't going to ruin the conversion rate just for the sake of data. But what was interesting is it actually increased conversion rate. It actually increased conversion rate more than any other test we had run, which was a lot of tests. So then that led us to this great insight of, right, actually users want to be asked, users want to be prompted. So now we have a whole series of experiments in our backlog. We're actually asking users those questions, which again, back to your point of data is key. By asking those users the questions, you can then use that data to start to personalize that flow and to give something users back that's actually meaningful to them because they've already given you an insight.
Wow. So it sounds to me like almost by prompting the user to kind of think about their purchasing need, that there's almost a consultative kind of sale happening there.
Exactly,
Fantastic.
yeah, and that's something that you would never get from analytics.
100%. So, once we've got that measurement, that research in place, like you say, we can build hypotheses. That builds us our backlog, and we start testing. But let's just clarify what we mean by test. We just mean any kind of decision-making tool where we can find out whether that hypothesis, whether that idea is right. And it doesn't have to be an experiment. It doesn't have to be A/B testing. It could be, I think we spoke the other day about proof of concepts. It could be that we do phased builds, anything that is just a little bit faster at getting something in front of a user. Hugo, let me come back to you again. How do you frame the value of a test to a client, when you're trying to convince them to take that first step and dip their toe in the water?
I think that's it. It's a first step, and you're making a small bet to understand the learning. And I think if you can phrase it that way, that you're making tests across your site and you're just trying to learn, and you only invest into these big builds once you've got that learning. And we actually get a lot of clients who come to us and they've just invested in a whole site redesign or a whole page redesign. They've changed maybe 100 things. And they're really excited because they think they've done 100 improvements. But I think we know it's impossible. You can't make 100 improvements. And in reality, what they've done is they've made 30 improvements, 50 things that are completely flat, and then 20 things which are actually hurting them.
Yeah.
And what they're left with is a completely flat result. And they've invested time and months and resources into this build, and they have a flat result. But what's worse than that flat result is the lack of data, the lack of understanding. They don't know what are those 30 that are valuable and what are the ones that are hurting.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
For you to expand, a company that has got a, let's say, moderately good website versus a company that hasn't changed anything for the past decade or more, as an example, are you stating that it's still worth for this company that hasn't invested for more than a decade to do a step-by-step improvements rather than just, kill the beast and start from scratch?
I would still recommend testing, yeah. If they've got the traffic to test, then by testing those things, it means that when they do this big rebuild, they've got learnings and they've got data that feeds that bigger build. And perhaps if the whole site is completely outdated from maybe a UX, you could run one test where you don't change any component, you don't add any new motivation, but you just do a UX update across the site. So I would always, maybe I'm biased, but I would always want to break things down, test them, learn them, and then get that data.
Paul, maybe we can come. Sorry, I can see you.
Just 2 seconds for this concept. If you open on your mobile, there's a website called zagyourguitar.com in the US. It looks like 1980, website. If you check this out, they wanted to move to Shopify, and they choose the Shopify template with all those parallax stuff. Go live, 50% sales, just 50% dropped. Release back. They put it, it's still there, zagyourguitar.com.
Yeah, and it's not uncommon. We see it a lot where everyone is so confident that a big update is going to change conversion rate, and it does in the negative way.
And Maris, I think what you're probing at there is, doing a phased delivery there. I know that's something you've got experience of doing that. How's that worked out for you where instead of going, say, to experiments, you're kind of taking a project and trying to chunk it up, and then as you go along, you're checking whether it's having the right impact. Can you maybe walk us through that approach?
Yeah, sure. So for one, when breaking down large chunks into smaller chunks and essentially delivering piece by piece, we also don't necessarily always look for an ideal outcome or an ideal result. It's very frequently, like you mentioned, a proof of concept, or it's a test scenario where we are assuming, let's say, an integration is going to perform or do something in one way or another. Very frequently, those are complex integrations where famously can put a strain on Adobe Commerce Magento's performance, and it's worth testing before you build, obviously. And these testing, very different testing scenario, but it's that testing scenario on a data integration layer, or in a kind of making two pieces of technology talking to each other in various different ways, or kind of twisting and turning it, also to essentially get a better performance out of it before committing to the full build.
Yeah.
Because once you commit to that investment, usually it comes with, well, I don't want to necessarily say a regret, but it might come with a costly fixes later.
Paul, let's talk about a real example here. I know you've done work with a whole bunch of merchants working on checkout in particular. I know you've had really great uplifts there. Maybe just kind of talk us through that as an actual example of one of these pieces of optimization work.
Yeah, so as you probably know, in Magento, checkout is probably the hardest piece to customize, right? And there are a bunch of the different platforms and extensions. Every single extension vendor will get this. And there are a couple of new frameworks, I should say, also trying to get into the checkout. And there is a lot of information about how to optimize the product page for the better conversions, but it's only the start of the funnel. If you look into your data, you will see most of the people drops off on the checkout. So the way how we did this, we put a little bit of AI into this, with tracking people without obviously having idea who's the person. But based on the user behavior, we're trying to understand there's altogether 5 types of buyers, right? A regular buyer, then based on the signal, people, if they click on the discounted items, means he's looking for the discount. People who concerned about reading reviews and things like that. People like, so based on the personal behavior of that specific session, we embedding a different widgets on the checkout page, right? That's the core why, like Shopify, which is not allowing you to change the checkout, that's how Magento and Adobe can play a good game, optimizing this final page. So basically, different widgets we showcase different widgets on if the customer concerned about he's not make the decision, and we see that he's a little bit hesitant on the website, we showcase, 30 days money back guarantee or refund and stuff like that. If people are like a general buyer, we're basically showcasing the widget, convince him, 3 more people looking have this product in the cart, right? So this type of personalization, which is a lot of tools such as Nosto, and a bunch of them that they amplify for the listing pages and PDP, we're trying to amplify on the checkout for every single client. Yeah.
And just give me an idea of the kind of percentage uplift you've been able to achieve.
So just so for the records, right? It's not like you suddenly have 20% revenue increase. That will be fantastic if that will be the case, right? So for the context, if let's say 100 people complete, we're basically testing our checkout with the default checkout on A/B test, and then if let's say default had 100, then our will be 120. We're so confident that we even now winning the clients with the message like, hey, we're gonna work for free, and if our checkout would not perform at least 15% better, you don't pay anything. There is one more motivation is this checkout that we have, we partnered with the payment gateways, which is eventually giving a better rates. And most of the merchants stake with Stripe, Braintree, and things like that. So like we can negotiate the credit card transaction fee. So the value of what we deliver, it's not just a one-time improvements and a constant saving in the money.
So taking a more holistic view of optimization as well there with that kind of approach. That's fantastic. Last point I want to finish on today is about that compounding, because I think this is the most kind of compelling point that is that we're not trying to one-shot stuff. We're trying to create these feedback loops, and not just feedback loops where we get a winning test and we get to apply that to a site, but feedback loops where the lessons sharpen the strategy, the mindset changes the way the team works, and you're going to build more and more buy-in for this kind of approach. Paul, you've seen this across the network. Is that the kind of thing that you see compounding for those merchants, whether it's been the checkout work or something else?
So what I can see here in this, merchants eventually, we sharing their success that happened with one client was the success of everyone. If I see the one winning test on one client, we apply. Now let's talk about the agency that might be here, who we cannot sell the billable hours anymore. We have to deliver the results. So if you guys don't do the conversion rate optimization, that was my challenge how we get started. So there is a couple of studies, and the one platform that I recommend for everyone to explore is eVidu, which basically combine all the tests from the different vendors. You pay to get access there, but that's how you can generate nice ideas. So obviously, we proxy the success of one client to all the clients, but we still in a learning curve as well as an agency, and we use this platform to get the inspiration for the new tests.
Yeah. Marius, I know you've had incredible results as well. 1 year of A/B testing that's driven millions of incremental revenue. When you get results like that, how do you use that to keep building buy-in with leadership and the rest of the team to kind of keep the momentum up with this kind of approach?
That's a great question, and I think you touched it in our conversation in a backstage where people sometimes see the investment into the, or maybe it was you, Paul, so where people see the investment in the CRO as a one-step win. So you want, would you like to optimize your website? Yes, I would. Here's the initial offer. Of course, here's the money. Thank you very much. Now I've paid for it. I expect some results. So, and that's not how it works. It's not an event. It is a process. And the process needs to be run continuously for it to be effective in a way. It could feel counterintuitive that you can optimize only so far or thus far or else. The world is a very changing place as we know it. A year ago, you would spend a day that you get done in a minute with AI. That's just today's vision. Some years ago, we were working, not that many years ago, we were working even in Magento with technologies and front-end technologies that we only could have hoped for. 2-3 years in, we have that. Same, like if we wind time back with integrations as well, we used to send flat files exchange where kind of, before the days of the API. And let's not talk before the internet. So the world is constantly changing. The consumer is constantly changing, and the perception of consumer is always constantly changing. So what you need to show is always a little bit different from what you are doing right now. So one of the only constants in this world is change. That's kind of one trait that needs to be held in. Second to that, you really have to think very carefully, who are you optimizing for? A lot of the businesses that you guys are talking about are the B2C businesses or businesses that are kind of running retail. You are optimizing for the consumer. In the B2B world, you are somewhat optimizing for the consumer, but you are no longer optimizing for conversion. You are optimizing for other things, right? For instance, contact form sign-up is going to be way more valuable than another purchase or increased cart value, because that essentially opens you a new revenue stream, not just a purchase. And at the same time, the other optimization in the B2B world might be counterintuitive. You're not optimizing for more time spent on a site, you're optimizing for less time spent on a site, because you want people to place orders fast and efficiently. So two things. One thing that the only constant is change, and think about who you are optimizing for.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic point. And I know early on I said, retailers who might look at the conversion rate and say, well, nothing's getting better, but in the world of change, that doesn't necessarily stay there. It can slide backwards as well. So that change point is great. Hugo, last one for you here. I mentioned some of the amazing clients you've had the opportunity to work with. Maybe why don't you just quickly talk about some of the kind of cultural change that then happens in those teams, because I think that's a really important takeaway as well, that it isn't just about driving revenue, it can really change the mindset.
Yeah, definitely. I think what's interesting is when we kind of get these new great big clients, at the beginning, they're always really focused on, we want to increase conversion rate, we want more revenue, and they're highly focused on those wins. And when you kind of mature the program and then you're in kind of year 2 or year 3, the language that stakeholders use is a little bit different, and it's not, I don't think that will win, but it's, let's test it.
Yeah.
And the value from that mindset change is so big because you realize the value behind the learnings rather than just the wins. A win might get you a 2% uplift in conversion rate, which is fantastic. But a learning behind that win, or even better, a learning behind a loss, can, firstly, it can encourage you to have a whole series of experiments which can lead to wins. Secondly, you can then feed that learning throughout the whole business. So now your marketing, your whole entire business understands the users better, which can then mean that your product development is better. And now you're actually building products which are better for that user. And that's the difference. It's not just optimizing conversion rate on a site, but it's gaining learnings through experimentation, which moves the business in the direction for the users.
Yeah, I really love that fact. A great point to end on there, that we can really democratize the wins of CRO and take it out to the whole business and let it be a holistic win for everybody. That's a fantastic point to end on there, Hugo, so thanks so much. That's all we've got time for, everybody. I think it went really quickly, but there was a lot of great stuff covered in there. Can I just get a huge applause here for Paul, Maris, and Hugo?